Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and really get to the heart of complex topics for you.
And today we're tackling something pretty heavy, definitely fascinating, but also deeply unsettling.
Yeah, we're exploring the world of cults in American history.
Yeah.
We'll look at their formation, their impact, and crucially, the psychology behind them.
We've got some really interesting source material to guide us. There's a blog post looking at 4 notorious historical cults,
Okay.
an academic paper digging into the psychology of why people join these groups, which is, really key.
Absolutely.
And then some news articles covering more recent events, including a group called the Zizians with ties right here in the Carolinas.
So quite a range. Our mission, as always, is to distill this down, to give you the essential understanding of this really complex issue.
Right. So where do we start? Maybe with the word itself, cult.
Yeah, let's do that. Because cult, it's such a loaded term, isn't it? It feels inherently judgmental.
It absolutely is. It often gets thrown around for any group that seems, well, weird or different from the mainstream.
Right.
But for our discussion today, we need a more focused definition. We're drawing from that Hein Online blog post.
Okay, and how do they define it?
They focus on groups where a leader exerts excessive, really dangerous levels of control, and crucially, where this control leads to deaths.
Deaths.
Yeah.
That's a pretty stark dividing line. It immediately tells you this isn't just about unconventional beliefs.
Exactly. It points to the potential for real, catastrophic harm. And the International Cultic Studies Association, their paper adds another layer.
Oh, yeah. What's their perspective?
They compared the trauma of being involved in a cult to surviving a natural disaster.
Wow, a natural disaster.
Yeah, it really underscores the deep, lasting psychological damage these groups can inflict.
Okay, so with that framework, extreme control, potential for harm, even death, let's look at some cases. The Hein Online blog starts with People's Temple. Jim Jones.
Ah, yes. Probably the name most people think of when they hear the word cult.
Definitely. Where did it begin?
Jones started People's Temple back in Indiana, 1955. And what's striking initially is how progressive it seemed.
Progressive. How so?
They championed racial integration, which was huge at the time. They offered free meals, legal aid, addiction support, homes for the elderly. Jones was very vocal about equality, socialist ideals.
And he wasn't just some small-time preacher, was he? He had actual political clout.
Oh, absolutely. He was incredibly charismatic. He could mobilize his followers to vote as a bloc, which, made him useful to politicians, particularly Democrats, plus large charitable donations. He built real influence.
But obviously there was a darker side developing.
Yes. Beneath that surface of community and progress, a pattern of control and abuse was taking hold. People who left started talking.
Right, the blog mentions coercion, giving up possessions, abuse.
Exactly. And as scrutiny increased, Jones made a drastic move. 1974, he relocated the entire congregation to Guyana, South America.
To Jonestown, pitched as this agricultural utopia.
Yeah.
Right?
Pitched as utopia, yes. Far from the corruption of the outside world. But the reality, well, it was anything but.
Harsh labor, disease.
Armed guards, censored mail-in calls, constant fear. And Jones's paranoia was escalating, probably fueled by drugs. He even conducted these terrifying mock suicide drills.
Mock suicide drills,
Yeah.
just awful.
Yeah. This all led to Congressman Leo Ryan deciding to investigate in November 1978. People were reportedly being held against their will.
And that investigation ended horrifically.
Tragically, November 18th, 1978. As Ryan, some journalists, and temple defectors were trying to leave from an airstrip, they were ambushed. Murdered.
Oh my, Jones?
Knew this was the point of no return. He then ordered the mass suicide or murder, really, of his followers. 909 people.
909. How?
Cyanide, mixed into Flavor Aid. And it's often misreported as Kool-Aid, but it was Flavor Aid. Jones himself died from a gunshot wound, likely self-inflicted.
The scale is just incomprehensible.
It is. As the blog notes, it was the largest single loss of American civilian life in a non-natural disaster until 9/11, a chilling example of where this kind of absolute control can lead.
Unbelievable. Okay, the blog then shifts to Heaven's Gate. Very different ideology, more sci-fi, but another tragic end.
Right. Heaven's Gate. Founded by Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Lou Nettles in the early 70s, they both felt this deep spiritual crisis,
And that led them to aliens?
Pretty much. Their core belief was that God, Jesus, angels, they were all actually advanced extraterrestrials, and Earth was about to be, quote, recycled.
Recycled. So destroyed.
Essentially, yes. And salvation meant leaving your earthly body behind to join these aliens on their spaceship.
Okay, so how do they recruit people with that message?
They started in 1975. Applewhite and Nettles became Do and Tie. They emphasized shedding earthly attachments, extreme asceticism, celibacy. Some men, including Applewhite, were even castrated.
Wow, and they lived quite reclusively.
Yeah.
Very. They moved around, lived communally, always waiting for this spacecraft to arrive and take them to Heaven's Gate.
But then Nettles died in 1985. How did that affect things? She didn't ascend physically.
Right, that was a big challenge to their beliefs.
Yeah.
So the doctrine shifted. Now, they believed they had to shed their physical bodies, their containers, to make the transition.
And then the Hale-Bopp comet appeared.
Exactly. Mid-90s, they became convinced a spaceship was hiding behind the comet waiting for them.
Which led to the mass suicide.
Yes.
Yes.
March 1997, in San Diego, 39 members. They took phenobarbital mixed with vodka, put plastic bags over their heads.
And they were found dressed identically.
Yes, identical tracksuits, Nike sneakers. And they each had $5 and some quarters in their pockets.
The uniformity is just eerie.
It is. And importantly, they didn't see it as suicide. They called it a graduation, a transition to the next level. They even had a website explaining all this. Just incredible. Okay, third case from the blog. The Branch Davidians. Waco. This is much more recent, something many of us remember. And the political fallout was huge.
Absolutely. The Branch Davidians trace back to Victor Houteff, who split from the Seventh-day Adventists in the 1930s. He set up Mount Carmel near Waco, Texas, believing in a coming Messiah.
And eventually, David Koresh took over.
Right. Benjamin Roden succeeded Houteff, then Vernon Howell joined in 81. Howell quickly rose up, changed his name to David Koresh, and declared himself the Messiah.
Messiah. What were his specific beliefs?
Complex interpretations of biblical prophecy centered on himself. He also taught that his children would be holy and fathered at least 13 kids with various women in the group, including minors.
Okay, that plus reports of weapons stockpiling obviously raised red flags for authorities.
Big time. Concerns about illegal weapons led the ATF to attempt a raid on the Mount Carmel compound on February 28, 1993.
And it went wrong immediately.
Horribly wrong. A gunfight broke out. ATF agents and Branch Davidians were killed. That kicked off a 51-day standoff with the FBI.
51 days. I remember the news coverage, the loud music, the lights.
Yeah, the FBI used various tactics trying to end it peacefully, but it ended in disaster on April 19th when the FBI launched a final assault involving tear gas. A fire erupted.
And the fire consumed the compound.
Yes. 76 Branch Davidians, including Koresh and many children, died. The exact cause of the fire, who started it, is still debated and highly controversial.
And Waco became this rallying cry, didn't it? Especially for the far right.
It really did. It was seen as government overreach, an attack on religious freedom, and tragically, it directly inspired the Oklahoma City bombing by McVeigh and Nichols 2 years later on the anniversary of the Waco fire.
A direct link. That's chilling.
And even now, there are still Branch Davidians near Waco who believe Koresh will be resurrected. The legacy endures.
Wow. Okay, so those are the historical cases from the blog. Now let's shift to the news articles and this more contemporary group, the Zizians. This feels different.
It does feel different. Less overtly religious in the traditional sense, maybe. They came onto the radar after a Vermont border agent was killed in January 2025.
And the FBI investigation linked them to other deaths.
Reportedly, yes. Connections to 6 deaths across 3 states. And the profile is interesting. Young, very intelligent computer scientists seem to be prominent, and they connected online.
Online. That's a very modern element, isn't it? Facilitating group formation.
Absolutely. They apparently shared anarchist beliefs, but their online writings covered a whole spectrum: radical veganism, gender identity, AI, and it reportedly got more violent over time.
And the leader is believed to be someone known as Ziz.
Yes, Ziz, whose legal name is Jack Lasota. Computer science background, maybe an unconfirmed NASA internship. Lasota started a blog back in 2016.
What was the blog about?
Described as dark, rambling, outlining a theory about the brain hemispheres being at war. Lasota is a transgender woman and expressed a lot of hostility online towards various perceived enemies, even within the rationalist community where she was active.
Rationalist community, so like logic and reason-based.
Yeah, but it seems this ideology became a kind of intense, extreme mix of rationalism, ethical veganism, and anarchism. Some from that community felt Lasota specifically targeted vulnerable, isolated individuals.
Using rationality to justify violence.
That seems to be part of it, yeah. Reports mention things like rationalizing not paying rent or resisting eviction. It's a disturbing twist.
Have they had other run-ins with the law?
Yes. Back in 2019, Lasota and others were arrested protesting a rationalist retreat, blocking exits, wearing masks. And then there's this strange twist. Lasota was reportedly declared dead in 2022 after a boating accident.
Declared dead, but then reappeared.
Exactly. Which, could add a certain mystique for followers.
No doubt. And since reappearing.
Several violent incidents. Late 2022, an attack on a landlord in California, one person died. Police believe Lasota was there. New Year's Eve 2022, an elderly couple murdered in Pennsylvania. Lasota was arrested nearby for obstruction.
And then the Vermont incident in 2025.
Right. The border agent stops a vehicle. 2 occupants linked to Zizians, a shootout. The agent is killed. One occupant, Felix Balcolt, also known as Ophelia, is killed. The other, Teresa Youngblood, is arrested.
And what did they find in the car?
Ballistic helmet, night vision goggles, respirators, ammo, radios, shooting targets. Suggests they were prepared for a confrontation. And Youngblood had apparently applied for a marriage license with someone charged in the California landlord murder. So, connections.
And there were strange reports from North Carolina just before that, near Chapel Hill.
Yeah, neighbors near rental properties linked to them reported odd things. Long black coats, box trucks, an electrical cord running into a condo, a stretcher, people in robes walking silently at night holding hands. And Lasota had been seen there. Very unusual.
It paints a picture of a secretive, perhaps paranoid group. Now, staying in the Carolinas, that Cardinal and Pine article highlights other groups with concerning characteristics right here.
Yeah, it's a reminder that these issues aren't just historical or happening far away. The article mentions a recent indictment involving the United Nation of Islam and value creators.
What were the charges there?
Child labor, human trafficking, allegedly sending children, some to North Carolina, to work without pay, exploitation.
And then there's Word of Faith Fellowship in Skindale, called the state's most infamous modern-day cult.
That's the description. Founded in '79 by Jane and Sam Whaley. It's international now, but Spindale has seen lots of trouble. They have this incredibly long list of rules, 145 of them.
145 rules. About what?
Clothing, needing permission for purchases, bans on TV, movies, even drinking wine in a restaurant. Total control, and serious abuse allegations going back decades.
It's like the 2017 case, beating someone for homosexual demons.
Yes, Matthew Fenner's case. Indictments happened, but no trial yet on those specific charges. They've also faced fraud and trafficking charges unrelated to that, and yet the Whaleys are still running it.
Still operating. Remarkable. The 12 tribes are also mentioned, with a base in Hiddenite, NC.
Right. Founded in Tennessee in '72 by Gene Spriggs, they have a big community in Hiddenite. Persistent allegations of child abuse, exploitation. A Denver Post investigation in 2022 highlighted a lot of this.
Child labor, illegal homeschooling.
All alleged, yes. And their teachings are deeply problematic. They use the curse of Ham to justify slavery.
Justify slavery, seriously.
According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, yes. They view it as a marvelous opportunity for Black people. They run the Yellow Deli restaurant chain. There's one in Hiddenite, often seen as recruitment fronts. Lots of restrictions.
Yeah.
No internet, no secular media.
And Spriggs died recently.
In Hiddenite in 2021. But the group and the delis, they're still active.
Okay, another case. Holy Tabernacle, Born Again Faith Inc. in Cumberland County. John C. McCollum. This sounds like forced labor again.
A really grim situation. McCollum founded the church in '81, ran the McCollum Ranch. Children there were allegedly forced into servitude at his fish markets. People lived in fear of McCollum, the chief apostle.
Was he brought to justice?
He was arrested in 2017, along with several women from the ranch. But he died in 2018 before his trial. The testimonies were harrowing, though.
And finally, the cult at Sarah Lawrence. How does North Carolina fit in there?
Larry Ray, the leader, moved into his daughter's dorm at Sarah Lawrence College in New York in 2010, started manipulating students. By 2013, he'd moved the core group, including victims, to Pinehurst, North Carolina.
And the abuse continued there.
Oh, yes. Severe psychological abuse, physical abuse, sexual exploitation, forced prostitution, just horrific.
What happened to Ray?
Arrested in 2020, convicted in 2022 on 15 counts, including sex trafficking. Got a 60-year sentence in 2023. Survivors are also suing the college. It shows how these dynamics can emerge anywhere.
It really does. So we've seen these cases, historical, contemporary, varied ideologies, but all involving intense control and harm. Let's turn to that academic paper now. How does psychology help us understand why people get involved? It seems the paper pushes back against simple explanations.
It really does. It highlights how common it is for the public, often influenced by media, to stereotype cult members. Seeing them as weak, unintelligent, or just fundamentally different from us.
Making it easier to distance ourselves, I guess.
Exactly. The paper talks about the fundamental attribution error.
Okay, what's that again?
It's our tendency to explain someone's behavior based on their personality or disposition while downplaying the power of the situation they're in.
So we think, oh, I would never join a cult, assuming it's all about the person's internal flaws.
Precisely. Instead of considering the intense situational pressures, the manipulation tactics, the paper actually cites research showing that learning about this bias, specifically regarding Jonestown, helps people understand it wasn't just about crazy followers.
That's crucial. So the situation matters a lot. The paper mentions classic studies, Zimbardo, Milgram, Ash.
Yes, those studies are foundational. Zimbardo's prison experiment, Milgram's obedience studies, Ash's conformity experiments, they all powerfully demonstrate how much our behavior is shaped by our environment, by authority, by group pressure.
And cults are masters at creating those environments, right?
Absolutely. They create these high-pressure situations. Isolation, repetitive indoctrination, a charismatic leader demanding obedience, group norms that punish dissent. It's a perfect storm for compliance.
And what about the basic human need to belong? That seems key.
Hugely important. The paper calls it affiliation motivation. We're social creatures. We have a deep need for connection, for belonging.
And cults promise that.
Often, yes. They offer intense community, unconditional acceptance, especially appealing to people who feel maybe lonely, insecure, or are searching for meaning. Think about Schachter's research anxiety increases affiliation needs, or Van Kappelen's on religiosity fulfilling belonging needs. Cults tap right into that.
It even mentions attachment theory. Like insecure attachment makes people more vulnerable.
Potentially, yes. If someone didn't get secure attachment early on, the promise of total acceptance from a group can be incredibly seductive, like Harlow's monkeys choosing comfort over sustenance.
So people aren't usually thinking, I'm joining a cult. They're thinking, I found my people. I belong here.
Exactly. Zimbardo's quote in the paper nails it. No one ever joins a cult. People join interesting groups that promise to fulfill their pressing needs. The negative label comes later from the outside or when things go wrong.
Okay, so they join seeking community. Then what? How does the indoctrination work? The paper mentions specific tactics.
Right, it's usually a gradual process, not instant brainwashing. Barron outlines stages. It often starts with the leader's charisma. Chaikin's research shows attractive communicators are more persuasive.
Makes sense.
Then, constant repetition of the group's message, like that old study on radio persuasion repetition, sinks in.
Yeah.
The foot-in-the-door technique is classic. Get someone to agree to small things first, attend a meeting, do a small task, then escalate the demands. Friedman and Fraser showed how effective this is.
So it builds commitment incrementally.
Yes, and they exploit the norm of reciprocity. The leader gives you something, attention, validation, a sense of purpose, and you feel obligated to give back, often far more. That quote about Jim Jones giving 5 minutes and getting a life in return, chillingly accurate.
Wow. And what about cognitive dissonance? How does that keep people in?
Ah, yes, Festinger's theory. When your actions conflict with your beliefs, it creates discomfort, dissonance.
So if you've sacrificed a lot for the group, quit your job, cut off family, but then doubts creep in.
Exactly. That creates dissonance. To reduce that uncomfortable feeling, you're more likely to double down on the belief, to rationalize your sacrifices. This must be right because look what I've given up for it. It reinforces commitment.
It's a powerful trap.
Yeah.
The paper also brings up in-group bias and social identity. How do those lock people in?
Okay, so in-group bias is our natural tendency to favor our own group, us, and view outsiders, them, less favorably, sometimes even negatively. Cults amplify this massively.
Creating an us versus the evil world mentality.
Precisely. The group has the truth. Everyone else is lost, corrupt, dangerous. Think Sharif's Robbers Cave experiment, how easily groups turn hostile towards each other.
Right.
And social identity theory from Tajfel and Turner says our group memberships become part of who we are, our self-concept. So we're motivated to see our group positively because that reflects positively on us.
Which means criticizing the group feels like criticizing yourself. And praising it feels good.
You got it. It reinforces loyalty, makes members protective of the group, and often leads to derogating outsiders, which further isolates members. It builds psychological walls.
So putting it all together,
Yeah.
it's really a toxic mix, isn't it? Manipulative leaders exploiting basic human needs for connection and meaning, using these well-understood psychological principles to gain and keep control.
That sums it up well. It's far more complex than just saying members are brainwashed or inherently flawed.
Uh-huh.
Understanding these psychological dynamics is crucial.
Yeah, it helps move past the simple stereotypes and maybe fosters a bit more empathy for people caught up in these situations. You see the vulnerability.
Exactly. And the immense difficulty they face if they do manage to leave and try to rebuild their lives.
It's definitely sobering.
Hmm.
Which brings us to a final thought. We've seen how these dynamics played out historically. But, thinking about today, our constant search for connection, the rise of online communities, how might these same tactics manifest now, maybe in ways that aren't so obviously labeled cult?
That's the critical question, isn't it? Are the warning signs shifting? Are there new kinds of groups or online movements using similar manipulation?
And what's our role in all this? How do we foster critical thinking, promote genuine connection, to kind of inoculate ourselves and others against these harmful influences?
Heavy questions. Definitely something for you, our listeners, to ponder.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a truly complex and often tragic subject.